and we're talking about Jake's sleepers, breakouts, and busts. So you gave me two sleepers. They are Kendry Miller and Michael Wilson. And I love this. These are not a couple guys that we've spotlighted a lot here. So tell me why you like Miller and Michael Wilson.
So Miller comes down to what I thought of him coming out of college, and the funny thing enough was that I compared him pre-draft to Jamal Williams, exactly the player I thought he could be, and that's why I thought the signing/drafting was a little confusing to me. After what you saw last year, I think there's an opportunity here that we see Williams potentially as a cut early in the season before we get started, and Kendry Miller takes over as number 2 spot. Whether or not they keep Williams on the roster, I think this is open for Miller to step forward this year. Whatever they're thinking of Kamara going forward, I just look at this and say you're talking about these split backfields, which are just so commonplace these days. And if Kendry Miller gets that split and gets the goal line carries, which was something we were talking about earlier with the Tank Bigsby situation, I think it could even be better that for him. So I actually think that Miller right now is a great last pick. I think it's similar to Dave before when he was saying like around 100 for Jameson Williams. Kendry Miller's not even close to that yet.
And the Saints, the second leader or the number 2 in rushing touchdowns last year was Taysom Hill. So that might not, is he a free agent still, Taysom Hill?
Yes, I don't believe he's signed yet. We saw Miller go just after round 10 in our most recent full PPR mock. His ADP for our 3 PPR mocks since the season ended, right at the end of round 10. Jake, you good with that?
I'm good with that. I'd go up another round or 2.
So I went, I did this whole, it's on the site. The NFC one will be on the site today, but I did basically a note per team, or at least one note per team from the owners' meetings, from the stuff I got, or just like I went back and I watched the entire Dennis Allen media session yesterday. And I was hoping somebody, because I didn't get a chance to talk to him, but I was hoping somebody would have asked about the backfield, just because I think it's a great call by Jake about what Kendry Miller could become. I'd be surprised at this point if they cut Jamal Williams, but you never know. Just how things go with teams. He's one of these locker room guys that everybody loves. It was like that in Green Bay. It was like that in Detroit. It seems to be the same thing in New Orleans. But he obviously doesn't have the same type of upside, clearly, that a guy like Miller has. And you're talking about playing behind a guy like Alvin Kamara, who's getting up in age, as we know, 28 years old. So will he either take away the secondary role, or will he be the handcuff should something happen to Kamara? Two things Dennis Allen talked about was the scheme change with Clint Kubiak. So I think the opportunities in some of the runs that we'll see will be beneficial to a guy like Miller, certainly beneficial to a guy like Kamara, and the role in the passing game as well for both those guys. The other thing he talked about was, and this was a little scary because I don't know which direction they'll go. My impression was tight end, but he was asked about his receiving depth, and he brought up Cedric Wilson having a veteran in the room, but he said, we're looking to still add a pass catcher, not necessarily a wide receiver, but a pass catcher. Now, again, I would think that's tight end if that's the way he's going to frame it.
That's Bowers.
But, it'd be interesting. But what direction do they go? Because when you look at this group right now that they have, Olave clearly should just be a target magnet, based on how this receiving core looks like. Rashid Shaheed's the number 2. Right now, Cedric Wilson is the number 3. A.T. Perry, which is somebody I know Jake likes a lot, is or at least did last year, Jake. I don't want to speak for him, but is in the mix as one of the top 4 guys, but a different, big body type of guy. And then you mentioned no Taysom Hill, so Juwan Johnson. So what route do they go to add another pass catcher? I don't think it's somebody in the backfield. But again, the way that Dennis Allen sort of framed it was not necessarily a receiver, another pass catcher. So it would suck if it's a pass catching back. It would suck if it's I shouldn't say it would suck if it's a receiver, because Rashid Shaheed is more of a 3 than a 2 for me in terms of NFL receivers. And so we'll see how they approach this. But yeah, Bowers or another tight end would make a lot of sense.
2 things. Number 1, the Saints get no cap relief if they cut Jamal Williams. So I don't think they're cutting Jamal Williams unless he just absolutely sucks. Number 2, I'm in the middle of doing the Brock Bowers profile. I list New Orleans as one of the 4 best landing spots for him because he could fit in and potentially be the number 2 target getter. He can be the underneath target like he was at Georgia, and someone who could be a difference maker in that offense, especially since, like you said, Jamie, they're changing their scheme. It's not going to be exactly like it was last year. That would be a good place for Brock Bowers to go, even though we know that there's going to be some quarterback fluctuation over, let's call it, the next 3 years in New Orleans.
I thought it was just a cool NFL answer for what Dennis Allen said. So when he was asked about Clint Kubiak, he said that he reached out to David Carr, who played for Gary, and asked Derek about his feelings on that. Did your brother have a good experience? And he said that David signed off on it right away. So the fact that he checked with the family to see if there was any issues with the Kubiaks, the Cars and the Kubiaks, that was fun.
All right, next sleeper for Jake is Michael Wilson, second-year receiver for the Cardinals. He had 565 yards and 3 touchdowns in 13 games. He actually finished strong, I guess, last 2 games. 35 yards and a touchdown and 95 yards, exactly 15.5 PPR fantasy points in both games for Michael Wilson in week 17 and 18 with Kyler Murray. That was after 2 straight games with 0 catches. All right, my question for you is, does Michael Wilson lose his sleeper appeal if the Cardinals take a wide receiver in the first round?
No, I actually expect the Cardinals to add a wide receiver and still like Michael Wilson as the 2. I felt like I was pretty high in comparison to the majority. I don't know about you guys, maybe with me on that, but on Michael Wilson as a whole last year coming into the draft, I think he can line up at any spot. I think you saw that they used him in various positions last year, whether you had Marquise Brown was out, whether whatever was going on in other situations. I know a lot of people have been talking about Dortch this offseason, and Dortch is fine for who he is, and I like him, but more of a 3 or a 4 on most NFL teams, in my opinion. I think Wilson could be a 1 or 2. More likely a 2. I think somebody alongside of him as the similar talent or better will really help him. And actually, that's why I'm fine with him. Like, if they draft Harrison, if they draft Neighbors, if they trade down and still take a wide receiver, I'm okay with that. I just think the fact is he's going to be the 1 or 2 on this team. And as the 1 or 2 with Kyler Murray healthy for an entire season, I can see him putting up top 40 numbers.
Is he on your radar, guys?
Absolutely. Yeah, I took him in our last draft. Very late too, which was that's the best part about
late
it.
round 12.
The better. And yeah, I mean, look, you always look for situations like this of there's continuity because he's played with Kyler Murray. The rookie coming in is going to have to learn that. Now, you would assume again if the draft capital is what it is, top 4 overall pick, Harrison or Neighbors, or if they do trade down and still get one of those guys or Dunze, he's still going to be a part of, like Jake said. You got to factor in Trey McBride too, So I think to assign a number to it, we'll see how that shapes up. Is either 1, 2, or 3 in terms of targets. One thing Jonathan Gannon said, again to go back to owners' meetings, was in regard to Kyler Murray, just thrilled to have him in off-season workouts, because he wasn't able to do that last year. So his command of the system will be better. His relationship with his receivers will be better. He did spend a lot of time talking about Greg Dortch as well. So, he'll be a part of this. And we know that he's sort of been kind of like that, guy we always talk about when there's somebody missing. He's one of those guys that steps up and plays well. And really, that's the only time he's ever done that. He's never been a featured part of the offense. But without Rondell Moore there, he should have that slot role kind of locked up. But in any event, yeah, it's a great call. I mean, just based on what the opportunity is. Now, if they draft 2 receivers, then you got to be a little different because then they're looking at it and saying he may not be the 1 or the 2, which he still could be, but they may just not be viewing it that way if they're concerned, because he did miss a lot of time with injury last year, which was a little frustrating.
Yeah,
that's kind of part of his game.
What he does, right? Yeah,
he had that at Stanford as well. What kind of target on a give me a number, Jake, per game? Marvin Harrison's in Arizona, Trey McBride's in Arizona, Michael Wilson's there too. How many targets do you think Michael Wilson can get from week to week on average?
You want the end of the year number, or do you want a per game number?
Per game.
I think he lives in the 4 to 6 range.
Okay. Yeah,
right.
I'd say 5.5 per game.
Yeah.
Could be right around where he's at. And so you're taking a shot with him with a late pick. I don't think I would do it in non-PPR. And I think I wouldn't do it in half PPR either. But full PPR, where receiver value obviously big, if it's one of Jamie's leagues where it's 3 wide receiver and a flex, yeah, that's a guy for your bench.
See, that's interesting because I think depending on who they draft, now Marvin Harrison obviously, but I think depending on who they draft alongside of him, I actually liked how Michael Wilson was targeted in the red zone and specifically in the end zone. I actually think he can be a touchdown maker for them, so I would actually like him in all 3 formats.